Okay, this is a video for Ed from Jersey. Yeah, I could say that. I'm from Long Island, but he's doing a '65 Rambler American. I think he said it was a 330. This is a 220, and he was asking questions about if I had to do anything special to get the engine in. Obviously, he knows about the Crossmember. Has nothing to do with that. Here's the deal. Okay, is it a tight fit? Yeah, it's a tight fit for a couple of reasons. Back in '64 and '65, I don't know if you could see it, but if you went behind past the valve cover, you got about 1/4 of an inch to the firewall. '64 and '65 does not have the hump in it for the V8 head that they started in '66, because it was never a V8. '64, '65 has a shorter nose, several inches, so that makes things kind of tight. I prefer mechanical fan. Some people like electric fans. That's a debate that's been going on. We're not even going to get into that. But basically, I got a 7-blade fan with a 1/2-inch spacer. And when you run a 1/2-inch spacer, you got to machine the front of the water pump a little bit, because it doesn't all fit together. I'm also running a Mitsubishi alternator because I want it to always charge, and some of the obvious things that you see, the magneto, the tunnel ram, and stuff like that. No problem with the headers anywhere near the steering shaft. Okay, now when this car was put together, I used Headman headers. Okay, I re-welded and port matched the headers, and the headers have always been too small for this car. The first year I tried to take them back out with no success, to say the least. But since then, I've taken the front end out of this car and put a straight axle in it, so now the headers fall out. So we will be investing, possibly this winter, depending on how the Concours goes, in a set of bigger tubes. The bracket for the automatic is still there. No way you could ever use it. It would go right down into the valve cover. Okay, some of the originality I left in the car, like the voltage regulator, stuff like that. The master cylinder that I chose at the time, I think, was from a '72 Gremlin with disc brakes, and if you drop down below it, oops, there's a line lock and the manual portioning valve hidden down there. It wasn't supposed to be hidden. I just found a neat place to put it. Wiring harness is factory, just slightly modified. I mean, these alternators are as easy as a GM alternator to hook up, but I know you could rev that thing to $7 grand constantly and it won't say bye-bye. I still think the input alternators are better. They're balanced better. They work better. At an idle, that thing will put out almost 70 amps. Not that I have anything that I need current for. The only thing I'm doing is recharging the batteries, and if it's at night, burning the headlights. Engine mounts. When I bought this car from my friend, it came with a VA Crossmember. Okay, VA Crossmember had a dent right in the center. But needless to say, it came with the Crossmember. What I chose to do, since this was a '64 has no mounts at all. It just has 2 holes drilled, and if you look at the early Crossmembers, you wonder what those 2 holes are under the mounts. That's because I guess they were using the same jig. That's for the this had a overhead valve engine. It wasn't flathead in this thing. So what I chose to do was I sat there and cut them off the other Crossmember, positioned them in here, and welded them in. As you'll see by every Crossmember I've ever seen, they're welded really bad. Junior's car, we bought a Crossmember, and it came damaged, and I wound up cutting it off and putting it onto another Crossmember. They say the V8 Crossmembers are stronger. The only thing I've seen on the bottom is the plate. It has like a little rib in it, which I guess could add strength. But I've had the wheels off the ground a couple of times in this car before it was a straight axle, and I've yet to bend it because everything lands in the same spot. And I know it does because the notching I had to do back here for the carburetor. Okay, it's still identical. This thing has solid mounts in it. I made my own solid mounts back then. That's for the Trainee Crossmember. Okay, Trainee Crossmember. I'm not gonna be able to videotape under that. I have no light here where the car's sitting. Trainee Crossmember is. Let's move forward. I'm just gonna hold it. I'm just leaning against the car. The current Trainee Crossmember is the factory Crossmember, and if I remember right, it had a lip in it, and I remember putting 2 cuts in the lip and flattening the lip down, and that allowed me to run a factory mount. I remember picking a couple out of the parts catalog at a local auto parts store, and the factory mount, when I bent that tab down, I was able to drill the 4 holes for the factory mount, put it in here, but the factory mount was all sagged and I couldn't use it, to say the least. So I had to duplicate that, and I remember buying a mount that was very tall. It was like very tall, and it had 2 holes in it like this. And I remember taking that mount, okay, cutting it and putting it into a 90 degree and putting the 2 original holes at the same height as my worn out mount, and everything went right in. Obviously the drive shaft was cut, the rear end's been changed. And for the people that don't know, a 6-cylinder rear end, 6-cylinder rear end, the V8 rear end, meaning the Model 15 and the Model 20 have the same depth of the pinion. Okay, so if you're swapping them out, you can reuse the drive shaft. Also, if you're going to swap over to an 8.8, the drive shaft lands in the same category also. To have over here somewhere, one of the shafts, not this one. This one is the original Concord shaft with a combination joint on the back for the 8.8. And this was what was in there when I put the 8.8 in. It didn't touch the tranny or the engine in the car. But since then, I've stepped up to a bigger shaft that's 4 inches shorter. Now I just have to do a universal change. So there is a difference in a 1/2 inch on the 2 shafts. And the joints are bigger on this one. Still not monster joints, but they're bigger than these AMC ones, which almost look like steering joints. So, but it takes a decent amount of power and some bite before you start ripping this stuff apart. Okay. I don't know what else there is. So basically, if you get yourself a Crossmember and you get the mounts, the engine. I don't know how it is with a factory pan, but this has deep Meladon pan in it. With the deep Meladon pan, engine goes in, gets bolted in, tranny goes in second. Engine, headers, transmission is the way I did it. And the dipstick tube might require a little modification like that one did, and I'm still going to alter that one like I did on the Concorde, depending on where you're going to get that transmission from. Some of the dipsticks come out back behind the intake. You're definitely not using that. You need to bring it up the side, and you could do gradual bends in the upper bend and reposition that bracket and bolt it to the last head of bolt and have 0 tension on it. The trainee tunnel for a 727, not a problem. Where the shifter linkage is, was a little too close for my comfort. Okay, I only had like a 1/2 inch room, so I gently massaged it. You can't even tell when you're inside the car. Well, it's going to be dark anyway. But I gently, you're not going to see it. I gently massaged that, so I had all sorts of clearances. This car kind of like uses the throttle position linkage, kinda, but all the valve body modifications I did, I'm actually controlling line pressure with that, but that's a video in itself. So with that, I haven't started this car in a month or 2. I have to actually clean it before I use it again. So let's give it a little kickoff. Okay, let's kick her off, guys. A couple of pumps, not too many. It's tunnel rammed. go.